Grab yourself a double-double, throw on some red and white, and make yourself a poutine. It's time to celebrate Canada Day. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, and it is the long weekend. It is the July Canada Day long weekend, and I am here with a very special video. Now, this isn't Canada Day. Canada Day falls on a Sunday, so I thought I'd put it up the Friday beforehand in celebration of that upcoming day. It is Canada Day long weekend here. I am super excited. I get a full long weekend away from both jobs. I'm so pumped. So in honor of Canada Day long weekend, I decided to make the Canadian A book tag. Now, I don't know if this is an original book tag. I did kind of search around for any Canadian book tags, and I did find a couple, but I tried to do different questions and some different aspects of Canada. So if this isn't 100% original, I do apologize. I did try searching around and decided to create my own tag. So this is the Canadian A book tag. So for the questions, I've come up with just aspects of Canada that we all know and love, and I'm going to relate a bookish question to them. You guys know how tags work, so we're just going to jump right on into it. Now, poutine up here in Canada is just come to be known as our Canadian cuisine dish of choice, but that essentially is fries mixed with cheese curds and gravy on top, and it is delicious. I try to eat it at least once a year. It's a little bit on the heavy, unhealthy side, so I try not to eat it more than once a year. And so for this question, pick a book that you like to reread at least once a year. Now, I could choose The Hunger Games because that is one of those books I reread once a year, or The Hobbit, which I try to reread once a year. But for me, I'm going to go with a newer one. For me is the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. Now, a lot of you guys, this might be your first pick, but for me, this is the first time I've actually owned the book series. I've actually started my second reread through of the whole series this year. Hopefully going to continue that. So for me, the Harry Potter series is a new must reread once a year type book series for me. Question number 2 is hockey. Now, it's not actually our national sport. Our national sport is lacrosse, but I don't even know what that sport's about, except it can get pretty darn violent. So I'm going to go with hockey, because that is the national sport that I grew up with. I am a huge Winnipeg Jets fan, and I moved out of Winnipeg the year the Jets were moving in, which was super disappointing. But we have a great mix of Canadian teams up here, so I decided to pick hockey. For this question, you're to pick an author with a die-hard following. For this question, I'm choosing Melanie Dickerson, the author of the Hagenheim series, the Regency Spies of London series, and the Medieval Fairy Tale trilogy. I really like Melanie's writings. Of course, I own all her books. And in the Christian booktube circles, Melanie Dickerson seems to be on everybody's shelf, so she has a pretty solid fan following. Question number 3 is the Trans-Canada Highway, or the number 1 highway. Here in Canada, we have a highway that goes all the way from Vancouver to the east coast of Canada called the Trans-Canada. I really like driving on the Trans-Canada. It's a lot less stressful than some of the other highways I've been on, and it is just a really nice long highway to go from point A to point B all across Canada. For this question, you're to choose a book that has locations that you yourself have actually been to or lived in. And for this, I am going with Maud by Melanie J. Fishbane, which is a Canadian book by a Canadian author about the life of a Canadian author, Ella Montgomery. So this is a very Canadian answer. Now, Maud features locations such as Winnipeg, which I've mentioned I've lived in. I really loved the way she described Winnipeg. It's still one of my favorite quotes of the book because it's such a legit description of Winnipeg. Another place she's mentioned is Regina. I've lived near and have been to Regina, and as well as Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. I lived in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan for a summer, so Regina, Saskatchewan, Prince Albert, and Winnipeg, Manitoba are all places that I've been to. Question number 4 is double-double. If you roll up to your local Tim Hortons and order a double-double, you're getting a coffee with double cream and double sugar. You can probably roll up to any coffee shop in Canada and they will know what you mean, even if it's not a Tim Hortons. Now, for double-double, I picked to pick a sequel that was better than the first book. I don't know where my thought process was going, but it seemed to work, so we're going to go with it. So the sequel I chose that was better than the first one was The Reclaiming of Shiloh Snow by Mary Weber. I liked The Evaporation of Sophie Snow. I had a few problems with it, as I do with most of Mary Weber's books, but I was still very intrigued by the story. But Reclaiming Shiloh Snow totally redeemed the first book for me. The characters got better, the character development got better, the storyline had a very powerful message to it, and it overall just wrapped up everything so well, and it made me enjoy the first book a lot more than I did. So this one was definitely better than the first book. Question number 5 is Canadian Goose. Now, I have made a joke that they are our Canadian Air Force, and they do look graceful and gentle as they're floating along the ponds here up in Canada. But let me tell you, the Canada Goose can be a vicious little monster. Take it for someone who was raised on an acreage with free-range geese roaming around her farmland. Those things are a menace. So for this question, pick a book that had a villain or a villain twist or villain development that completely took you by surprise. For this, I'm going with Forestborn by Shannon Hale. I was completely thrown off track about who the villain was or how this villain was developed, and it was such an amazing development and good story development, as well as such a fantastic character development as well. It completely took me off guard. I remember gasping out loud when I realized who it was, and that to me was just an excellent development of a story. Question number 6 is A. Now, up here in Canada, we do make fun of ourselves, and other countries make fun of us as well for saying A at the end of every sentence, which we don't. Although I do realize I say a lot more than I thought I did. So it tends to be our Canadian catchphrase. For this question, pick a character with a well-known catchphrase. For this character, I chose Captain Thorn from The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. Captain Thorn says aces a lot. Now, there's a couple of characters with a few catchphrases that I could have used from this series alone, but I went with Captain Thorn because he's such a dashing rogue. Plus, aces kind of was the first thing that came to mind when I thought of this question. Question number 7 is colorful money. Up here in Canada, we have very colorful money. Up here in Canada, our 20s are green, our 10s are purple pink, and our 5s are blue. The 50s are like a reddish pink, and the 100s are like a goldish brown, but I don't see those very often. Also, I would have shown you some, but your girl is broke, so I didn't have any cash on me. In book tags, it's always great to show off a beautiful cover, so for this question, show off a book with a gorgeous cover. For this question, I went with The Trader's Game by Jennifer A. Nelson. It was the cover that first drew me to this book. It is such a pretty cover. I love it when people mix gold and silver. It's not very often, but it happens. And you got black roses. It's just a very stunning cover with the dagger, the roses, what looks to be vines, and possibly a snake, which is interesting because I hate snakes. But it's just such a pretty cover that I had to show it off. Question number 8 is Anne of Green Gables. Anne of Green Gables is Canada's literary mark to the world. Anne of Green Gables and Ellen Montgomery is probably Canada's literary contribution to the world. Everybody knows who Anne of Green Gables or who Ellen Montgomery is. She is clearly a Canadian staple. But for this question, you're to choose a Canadian author who is not Ellen Montgomery. The author I chose to feature is Rachel McMillan, the author of the Herringford and Watts mystery series. I loved her book, The Bachelor Girl's Guide to Murder, plus this title is still super fun to say. I was very much drawn to this book by the title alone. She has a fantastic knack for writing a good mystery. If you like Murdoch mysteries, which is also very Canadian, Sherlock and Watson, you have a gender swap Sherlock and Watson that takes place in Toronto, Canada. So it's like a mix of Sherlock meets Murdoch mysteries. And finally, question number 9 is, do you know so-and-so from Canada? Now, it used to be a joke when I was a kid when you'd say, hey, I'm from Canada. A lot of people would make the joke of, oh, do you know so-and-so from Canada? I don't know if that's much of a joke anymore, but I decided to use this question as a way to tag people. For this video, I am tagging Felicia from the Little Prairie Library, my fellow Canadian booktuber, as well as Haley from Haley in Bookland, also a Canadian booktuber, and Zoe from You're a Book Nerd, Zoe. So I'm going to be tagging those 3 lovely Canadian ladies. If you're not Canadian, this is also open for you to do. I would love to see some of my American booktuber friends do this tag as well. So let me know in the comments below if you guys are planning on doing the Canadian A book tag. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and happy Canada Day. Bye!